course, just 2 years later, Sam Raimi comes out with Spider-Man 2. And this is a position... I've already said, I don't empathize with the position he had for the first movie. But how do you go about the second movie? People love your first one. How do you top yourself? Well...
And not only did he find a way to top himself, he knocked it out of the park. He
exactly
did the impossible. Like, he was able to make not just a great sequel to a comic book movie, but this movie just had layers to it that I don't think anyone really expected. You know, especially going off of how some of the first movie had elements of campiness and, you know, just being all around kind of corny and cheesy. I feel like this movie, in a way, just did away with almost all of that. I mean, there still are, like, fun, goofy moments, but yeah, this one definitely took itself a lot more serious. Are we gonna cut there? Because we knocked something over.
Yeah, we can cut.
Yeah, let's cut.
We're at 17:37.
Alright. Yeah, this movie really showcased Sam Raimi's understanding of who Peter Parker is. And the thing, like, of course this is a great Spider-Man movie, but it's also just a great character study in a man versus self story. The entire, it's just a great character arc for Peter, because in the first movie he becomes Spider-Man because his uncle told him, you know, with great power comes great responsibility, the guilt that he felt for his uncle. Whereas this movie, because, let me backtrack here. The amount of shit that happens to him, it's, you as an audience member have to ask yourself, why would anyone want to be Spider-Man? When he can't, he's getting bad grades, he can't
hold down a job. Can't
hold a job. He can't see Mary Jane's play. Because of this responsibility that he has.
He carries the guilt for his uncle's death and basically leaving his aunt alone.
He can't be the person that he truly wants to be because Spider-Man takes up way too much of his life.
And that's what's great. This movie asks that question. Why would he want to be Spider-Man? And the answer is he doesn't want to be Spider-Man. Because who would in this kind of situation? And the journey and the arc that he goes through is him wanting to be Spider-Man, which is, of course, is the arc at the end of the movie, is that he's not doing it anymore because of he feels he has to. He does it because he wants to, and that's just what the great arc of this movie really.
A movie like, and think about all the comic movies that came out before this, or even Spider-Man 1. I mean, none of them had the emotional resonance that this one carried with it, which is honestly very impressive and unseen before in any movie involving superheroes, because nobody thinks of them like that. They always think of the bright shining hero can do no wrong. If they're a brick wall, you know, nothing gets to them. It's seen in the comics constantly, but not in the movies enough, and this one set the stage for that.
And this was a movie where, you know, obviously it was out before the Dark Knight trilogy had come around. I think this was really like the first of its kind to even if you didn't really care for superhero movies, there was definitely something in this movie for everyone. You know, obviously it has amazing action and great Spider-Man scenes, but, you know, like we said, it's a story about a man struggling with his own identity and, you know, trying to find out who he wants to be.
You know, I just thought to myself, I kind of compare it to Jaws, the original one. Not that there's a remake, but if you think about it, Jaws is a shark movie at the end of the day, right? Spielberg didn't have to make Jaws as good as it was. He could have half-assed it, made some just B-movie shark movie.
Yeah.
Right, and it probably would have sold tickets. It's kind of the same thing here. Sam Raimi didn't have to make a Spider-Man movie this good. He could have just made a movie with, you know, cool action and, you know, stuff that people wanted to see. But no, he went the extra mile and made a great character piece.
And this was only on, when it comes to the movies, Spider-Man's second outing. He already took that big of a leap with the character, which I really appreciate, and I know tons of other people do as well.
Think about one of the best factors of this entire movie is just the villain, Doc Ock.
Of course,
All right.
Alfred
And-
Molina did a great
I
job.
relate it, but same with Willem Dafoe. I mean,
He was
perfect
born.
casting.
Both of them were born to play the roles that they were given in both of these
Exactly.
movies. I think hands down, all of us could probably agree. Out of any Spider-Man movie, those two in their roles are definitely the highlights of any of the villains of the whole Spider-Man franchise.
It's hard to compete with it or even compare them. They're so well done. It's hard to say, is anybody on the same level as Willem Dafoe and Alfred Molina as their villains.
Of course, Sam Raimi continued the trend of Spider-Man. I mean, what makes Spider-Man villains so great is that he connects them to Peter somehow in his life. Of course,
Right.
Norman Osborn was his friend's dad, and then Otto Octavius is somebody who he's doing a paper on, and
One of
who
his
he
idols.
befriends.
A new role
Yes.
model, yeah, a new idol.
Yeah, it's just another way that he connects those villains to Peter, which I think really...
It makes it even
Big man
harder
great.
to fight on. It makes him an even more emotional villain. Someone Peter does not want to fight.
Oh, and we talk about how Peter has his own arc and things he has to overcome in the movie. And what makes Doc Ock such a great villain is you can see him struggling with a lot of the same things that Peter is. The whole thing about how it's his dream, everything he's doing with this machine, and he, as well as Peter, learns by the end of the movie that sometimes, that speech that Aunt May gave, that sometimes you have to let go of what's most important to you to do what's right, even our dreams. So I thought that was nice that Peter was kind of able to resonate that in the head of one of his
Exactly.
idols.
Because he figured it out for himself. You have to let go of your dreams of being a normal person, become Spider-Man. Same thing to Doc Ock. You have to let go of your dreams and just be a good person and do the best you can.
Well, I've seen people describe how Doc Ock is kind of, in a way, a reflection of Peter himself. I mean, they're both brilliant people, and they're kind of just two of the same people, just who went opposite paths. Of course, Doc Ock went to a villainous
Crazy.
path, whereas Peter went to the heroic. So
Yeah.
they're parallels of each other. And something else about Spider-Man 2 is just the Spider-Man No More story. And a scene I love it to death, and I talk about it all the time, is the Uncle Ben scene where he's
Yep.
in the car
Oh, yeah.
and the Take My Hand scene. It's one of my very few gripes of this trilogy is that arc was never finished. He never takes Uncle Ben's hand. And
Or we never see it.
right,
Never see
yeah,
it,
you never
right.
see it. But I gotta tell you, that scene where he tells Uncle Ben, "No, I'm Spider-Man no more."
Right? Make a grown man
Oh
cry,
my God.
honestly.
Tears to the eyes, too. Oh, my God.
Such a tearjerker scene. I love it so much.
I can tell you one of the favorite scenes of mine is just, I guess you say the opposite of a tearjerker. It's Edge of the Sea like shaking. Like the horror put into this movie by Sam Raimi. Very known for the Evil Dead series he made. He has a horror background. He knows what he's doing. And that scene with Doc Ock, he was just transformed with the accident. He's on the surgical table and the arms start wreaking havoc, throwing people left and right.
Easily
man.
one of the most
Oh my God.
iconic scenes in for comic book movie villains,
Yeah,
let alone
exactly.
Well,
just comic book movies in general.
It's a scene that establishes the threat. Every kind of comic book movie, you need to establish the threat, and that scene does it.
Why
I mean,
should
these
they
arms,
be feared? Why should the audience fear them?
right? And the arms just brutally murder these
Everyone
these
has
doctors who have done nothing wrong.
and that's just another thing on this movie, just doubling down on the seriousness. We have, in the first movie, as much as we love it, Willem Dafoe saying back to Formula O, turning people into skeletons, but the way that he gets introduced as a villain in this movie, just horrifying.
right.
I love. Okay, we gotta talk about a scary scene. But I love just the amount of humor and memes, especially that have been born from this movie alone. Out of all three of them, there's a lot of good lines. But the Doc Ock memes are.
Oh yeah,
classic.
the Raimi movies are infamous.
Yeah,
for
Sam
those.
Raimi has a
infamous.
very unique sense of humor, and I think it works for this trilogy.
It works well.
Oh,
And,
definitely.
yeah. Of course, we can't talk about Spider-Man 2 without the train fight.
Oh Jesus! Oh yes.
So apparently, this scene was planned long before the script was even written for this movie. So
Really?
they planned this scene like, from the big because Sam Raimi actually originally wanted Doc Ock to be in the first Spider-Man movie alongside Green Goblin.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I think the train fight was
Could you
just an
imagine
idea.
that? Oh, I guess we're getting it. No Way Home.
Yeah.
Alongside.
Right.
Finally, it back came full circle.
So this was a long time coming, I think, for Sam Raimi to put the train scene in there. I think he
Destiny.
always wanted it. Just the idea of it's a great concept for an action set piece.
And
So-
even though it's 2004, it still holds up to this day. I think it just always will.
Beautiful.
And it puts Peter in interesting problems that he has to solve. Like when Doc Ock throws him off the train, he has to use cars to sort of, I guess, pull him towards the
When
train.
he's chucking people off the train out the windows, he has to catch them all.
It's-
to stop the train. It's to save his grandma.
Unlike anything,
Oh, his aunt, my bad.
unlike
His aunt.
anything
Yeah.
that had been showcased in a comic book movie before.
It took 11 days to film that
I'm
train fight
surprised it
too.
didn't take
So
longer. I mean, you compare it to like the scenes they do these days. They're massively CGI. You can clearly tell.
Well,
by the time.
it's
This
interesting
one,
you bring
you
that up.
can't quite.
right. Well, that's an interesting point. There is a lot of CGI used in this movie. Don't get us wrong, but the thing that I love about Sam Raimi and his filmmaking is that CGI will be used, but immediately after he'll cut to a practical shot. So you don't notice the CGI as much
Right.
because he's always cutting back to practical shots. He only uses the CGI when it's necessary.
And while we're on the topic of the train fight, obviously the action, the way it's stylized, it's amazing. But I always remember when I was, growing up as a kid, I always was very confused by the scene when all the passengers on the train bring him in and his face is revealed. I always thought, oh, that's kind of weird. Somebody would tell somebody about that. But
Right.
that is another thing about this movie that's gotten better as I've gotten older. Just Sam Raimi really made the city of New York, especially in this one, its own character.
It's humanized very well.
Like you have a lot of little like quirky stuff, like whoa, he stole that guy's pizza, and go Spider-Man go.
Of course, the pizza time.
Oh yes,
I'm
But
surprised we
pizza
didn't mention
time.
that
I mean, well,
line, the
how we skipped
iconic
that
line.
one.
But like the scene where they all see him unmasked, it shows, even with the slander that goes on from J. Jonah Jameson in the Daily Bugle, and all
how
this
can we
stuff,
forget J. Jonah
that
Jameson?
Spider-Man
We didn't mention him.
True.
How
That-
dare we?
Spider-Man brings together the best of all of us because he's such a relatable character, and I think that's really showcased on that scene when they all pull him in and they all make that promise to him out of just gratefulness for what he's done and just what he means to them, and also kind of shows what he means to just us as an audience.
It's pizza time. We were talking about perfect casting earlier with the villains. But what about J. Jonah Jameson? Oh my!
Probably
we just
one of
he's
the
still
most
around
perfect
today.
comic book castings. I mean,
So perfect he came back again for the new MCU. I
Yeah.
missed him dearly.
no, yeah, I think it was that they just had to cast because who do you really replace
There's no way to do
with
it.
that
You gotta-
character?
if you wanna
In the
make
Amazing
fans
Spider-Man
happy.
series, they didn't even do Jameson because I mean,
They didn't.
how can you recast
Yeah,
that character?
I think they were scared.
Yeah, yeah,
They
good
were
reason.
worried.
Right.
There's a lot of backlash online.
right. So
Closing thoughts on
Oh.
Spider-Man 2.
Yeah.
I mean, easily top 5 favorite comic book movies of all time for me.
I mean, it's just one of those movies where what can you really say that just hasn't already been said? It's
Yeah.
great. It's amazing.
Well,
Sam Raimi outdid himself.
Favorite scene from the movie? Is it train fight?
Oh, it's
Both of
trade
you guys?
fight. Trade
I
fight.
think it has to be the train fight.
Yeah, I mean, probably the train fight. But like we were saying earlier, this really was a character study on Peter Parker. So some of the best scenes of the movie are obviously ones that have nothing to do with him while he's in the suit. The
yeah.
speech that Aunt May gives him.
Got the
is-
raindrops.
Very inspirational.
Very inspirational speech,
Yeah.
and it stands out to me as just one of the most emotional moments in any superhero movie I've ever seen.
We could go on and on about this movie. There's nothing but good things to say. It blows us all away.